I'll see you guys in the dark.
The head-pounding knock came at the door for the 28th time that same night. Having to abandon my cooking once again, I promptly hustle out to the doorway. Orange bowl filled to the brim with a variety of homemade candies made by yours truly.
Trick or treat!
The toddler squeaks. As he looks up at me, the dinosaur hoodie droops over his beady eyes. What a nice costume, I sigh, grabbing a handful of candies and dumping them into the half-full pillow sack.
Thank you.
He says as he waddles down my porch steps and back to his dad. I slowly shut the door and retreat to the kitchen. I quickly pull my golden-colored chicken out of the steaming oven and onto the counter, where I begin to bombard it with spices of all sorts. I still do feel the slightest feeling of guilt. I mostly enjoy handing out my candies to the troublesome teenagers, as the older they are, the more I give them. It's really just a fun-sized chocolate bar, filled with a dash of vodka and some meth. I usually individually wrap them with pink or purple ribbons to make it look cheesy. Ever since I began giving out these candies, which has been over 3 years now, no one has accused me, yet, of their children waking up the next morning, vomiting and sweating until they either drop dead or go to the hospital. After all, I'm not even the only one that does it in the neighborhood. There's Peter down the street that hands out similar homemade lollipops that appear to be store-bought. I have to admit, I've really outdone myself this time. The chicken looked great and ready to devour. Before I can bring it to the dining table, I hear the knock at my door for the 29th time. The knock sounds hard, shaking the floor. Shocked, I peek through a small crack I make in the door and see a small boy, maybe 6 or 7, wearing a small little white mask, similar to the Jabberwockies' dance crew mask. He's wearing a black hoodie and black jeans. He stands there staring at me from behind his mask. I grab the bowl of candy off the drawers behind me and hold it in front of him. Here, take a piece. Your costume really scared me. He peeks down at the candy and looks back up at me.
I know your secret, Anne.
A ghostly voice cold as ice mutters. His voice shoots chills through my body. How did he know my name? Where the hell were his parents? He remained silent after this statement, waiting for my reaction. What do you mean? I stammer.
Your candies are drugged. They make my friends sick.
Following this statement, he slapped the bowl out of my shaking hands, scattering candy all over my porch. The bowl shatters upon impact. What's your problem, kid? Pick that up this instant, I shout, stomping out my door. The child tilts his head, appearing to be confused at the statement. You heard me. Pick up my candy, I repeat. He shakes his head, backing up a couple of steps. Well, how would you like it if I slapped your candy bag out of your hands? Not very nice, huh? Now pick up my goddamn candy. He shrieked a high-pitched scream and ran down the steps of my porch and across the street. Hey, get back here! I shout, slamming the door behind me and slipping on my slippers. I sprint across the street and past innocent children in costumes and bewildered parents. I manage to see a small, dark figure pushing his way past others. He turns onto the next street, crowded with cars and screaming kids. At least this street is lit up. I could clearly see him far ahead of me on the uneven pavement, but he was far too fast. He turned the next street very quickly, causing me to lose him. Grumpy, I make my way back home to see kids huddled on my porch taking fistfuls of chocolates like a piñata just burst. I make my way up my porch and realize my front door is locked. The kids, watching me curse at the starry sky, flee towards their angered parents and quickly made their way onward. Luckily, I usually keep my back door unlocked, so I hop my fence and manage to make my way into my nice, cozy house. Locking the door behind me, I turn on my porch lights and return to my kitchen. My chicken was now cold, undercooked, and ruined, so I decided to clean up my porch. I make sure to unlock the door this time and head outside. A Halloween night was almost over now. It was 11 o'clock. I decided to bring a chair out and sit on the porch for the rest of the night. Only a couple of guests attended, all teens. Once the last light on the street turned off, I returned back inside and popped in one of my old horror movie flicks, Hellraiser, and began to doze off on the lumpy couch next to my bowl of steamy, buttery popcorn. But before I can completely fall asleep, a loud knocking came at my door. What in the world? I mutter, bolting up from the couch. I swing the door open and shout, "Go home, it's past midnight, you." I pause. It's the boy in the black hoodie. Before I have a chance to react, he disappears across the street once again. "You best run away before I call the cops on you. Get away from my house." With all my force, I slam the door shut and lock it. Just in case, I grab a knife from the kitchen and return to the couch, ready to scare off any late-night visitors. I return to the couch and lie down like nothing happened. The movie is almost over. Same ending I've seen a million times. The movie was over for a while. I turned off the TV and fell asleep on the couch for no apparent reason. I was probably asleep for about 2 hours before I heard my back gate creaking open. Now fully awake and alert, I grabbed my sharp knife off the floor, standing in the middle of the living room. I quickly flicked on my light switch and stared at my sliding doors, eyes round as quarters. For around 15 minutes, all I could see were the sprinklers lying dormant in the middle of my lawn, flowers swaying in the gentle wind. Just when I thought it was my mind being paranoid, I heard the 29th knock at my door of the night. Same knock as the other two, shaking the floor, causing me to jump out of my skin. I dare not open the door, as the child might be there. I creep toward a nearby window in my bedroom that reveals a part of my porch. I open the shades enough to peek through without any suspicions, and I see the same little black hoodie sitting on my porch steps, waiting for me to answer. He seemed harmless. Maybe he just needed help and he was afraid. But then again, he knew my name and my secret. No, I should probably leave him there. He might leave. I inspect his every movement, making sure nothing is harmful or will damage my property for the next 20 minutes. Just when I think he's going to get up and leave, he stands up and whispers something to himself. But I hear it loud and clear.
I know you're watching me through the window. Come out here, now.
His voice is soft, ghostly. His words seem to pass right through me, shaking me down to my core. I jolt back from the shades, heart racing. This cannot be happening. I need to wake up. I scramble out of my room and into the living room. I needed to act fast before this boy caused me any harm. Without thinking, I scream, "What do you want from me anyways?" There is no response. The only noise I can hear with my delicate ears is the wind picking up dead crunchy leaves. I decided to call up Peter for help. The only thing the police would do would get me locked up for my candy. I punch in the numbers, heart feeling like it would leap out of my chest any minute now.
Anne, what are you still doing awake?
Pete, you gotta help me. There's a little boy that won't leave me alone. He's some kind of spirit.
Geez, Anne. Did you eat one of your own candies on accident? I'll come over, but I assure you nothing's wrong.
Okay, thank you. Peter hung up shortly as I sat on the couch, miserable. Peter called 5 minutes later.
Help me.
Peter says in an agonizing voice. He strains out the words slowly. Pete, you okay? Pete! I cry.
The boy.
Peter mutters, hanging up. Tears streaming from my face, I sprint out the front door to see Peter standing on my lawn, cackling like an idiot. "You asshole," I sob, socking him in the chest. "Do you know how hard this night has been?"
Sorry. It's just that...
"Just shut up," I shout, clenching my fists. This boy has been tormenting me for hours. For all I know, he could be inside my house right now, wrecking everything. I shove Peter and storm off into my house, furious at the boy, furious at Peter, furious at myself. I climb into my bed and scream. I begin to cry a river as Peter hustles down the sidewalk laughing. As I sob in the darkness of my eerie room, I hear the shattering of glass, probably my sliding doors. Springing into action but still sobbing, I grab the knife that was sitting on my nightstand and roll under my bed. The best hiding spot I could think of at the time. I hear small, soft footsteps on my wooden floor outside my room. I control my sobs as much as I can as the shadow of tiny feet walking past my doorway. The little feet return and head toward my room. The door creaks open, and the black-hooded child wearing his white mask tiptoes inside, holding a glass shard from my sliding doors that he broke.
I don't even have to look in. You're underneath the bed holding a knife, wishing for Peter. Just come on out.
I begin to sob uncontrollably as the boy crouches down and gives me the good old stare. He offers me a tiny hand, so friendly, so innocent. With pleasure, I bring the knife down on the boy's hand, creating a large, gaping gash in his hand. He lets out an inhuman roar as he retreats, leaving a slot of time for me to run out of the room. He chases after me with ridiculous speed, diving on top of my back and slicing the back of my neck. I throw the boy off of me, sending him down onto the wooden floor. I jog into the living room, grasping my wound with one hand, knife in the other, preparing myself for the worst. What I see limping around the corner is no longer a child. It is a pale, skinny, bony monster, still wearing the same mask and same hoodie, hissing and spewing out black liquids that appear to be blood. The height of it has increased as well, to about the same height as my waist. It crawled across the floor as it got a good grip on my ankle, taking 2 nips. I slice halfway through its neck, causing it to let go for a moment and drip black, slimy liquid all over the carpet. The pale figure squeals as it makes a final lunge at me. I plunge the knife through its mask, causing it to go limp and hit the ground. As the monster slams to the black carpet, I wake up in a padded cell, hair a mess, limbs aching. As I later learned, there was no boy with a white mask, no monster, but instead, there were candies that I confessed to giving out, and there was a Peter that is now dead. I had half imagined the events of the night. When Peter really walked away, he had heard me screaming and got worried. The front door had been locked, so in a panic, he smashed through the sliding doors. The boy, the white figure, the monster, all Peter. Near the beginning of the night, the boy in the white mask was real. He really did know that I had drugged the candy because he lived next door to me without knowing for the past few years, and saw me preparing the candy one day. My mind had cracked near morning. I had been taken in a few days later, lying next to Peter's corpse. I sat silently in my padded cell, admiring my surroundings where I would remain for a long time. I peer at my door, where a figure out of sight knocked at my door for the 30th time.
Let me start out by talking about the cemetery and the area around it. The cemetery is visually stunning. It has a completely open area where you can see all the graves around and into the distance. A spooky maze-like section with nature overwhelming the gravestones, with the overgrown plants everywhere, and a large church located at the far end. It's eerie, but also very beautiful at the same time. But before this incident, I never really cared about this graveyard all that much. I walked past it when having to go meet friends, or when I just wanted to take a shortcut to get home, and recently, to get to college. The cemetery was next to some very spooky alleyways and the council estate, so you had to watch your back when you walked through this place due to the constant rumors of drug dealers, muggers, and all sorts roaming the area at night. Nevertheless, the cemetery didn't seem too interesting to me, until a friend told me about a bizarre story involving his brothers and their friends. The brother and their friends used to play a game inside the cemetery at night. I don't recall my friend telling me exactly what game it was, but that's not important. They were just being typical teenagers, causing mischief to make the day worth it, since the district had the excitement of watching grass grow. After about 20 minutes of doing their little game, they began to notice something off. The guys felt like they were being watched. The atmosphere turned dark and bleak. Tension was among themselves, because they knew they weren't alone. Soon enough, one of the guys saw it. A person. This person was wearing a cloak, and he was holding something. This person was crouching on the gravestones, and he was slightly trying to move from one to another, getting closer. Well, one of them noticed and informed the others of the situation. They turned. All of them. Before the others could spit out a word, the cloaked man began chasing them, holding a hammer-like weapon. The guy was insanely fast, but due to the adrenaline rush and sports backgrounds of his opposing forces, the teens were faster. I don't want to make this their story any longer, so I'll finish by saying that the friends jumped over a large fence and escaped the cloaked man. The second they jumped over, a large thud was heard and the fence was pushed forward. The cloaked man had hit the fence with his large hammer and was close to cracking open a skull. Afterwards, they got home, and two of them told their brother, my friend. At first, I didn't believe their story, and neither did my other friends. The friend named Sam who told me, and the others of this story, doesn't exactly lie a lot, and he seemed serious. I was thinking that his brothers were lying to him, but I thought, hey, screw it, I'll go see if the cloaked man is there. And you guys are coming with me. A day after presenting my friends with a little adventure idea, I began planning where we should meet and how we were going to do the quest. Suddenly, my friend David texted me. He already went looking for the cloaked man the night before with his friends. His encounter with this cloaked man was a little less frantic than the other confrontation, but this time a little bit more outlandish. David went with two other people. When they went deep into the cemetery's open, one of the guys immediately shouted, "Hey, no-face!" David tried to tell him to shut up, but he wouldn't stop. The group carried on through the pathway, surrounded by dead people until they reached a large shed. David and the others hid behind a bush and saw him. The cloaked man was inside. He was examining his weapons. Apparently a large hammer, a rusty-looking wrench, and a decaying machete. Eventually he stopped and went outside of his shed, and into the church. Unexpectedly, the church bell was heard. Loudly. The guys watching didn't know what the hell was going on, but the bell was ringing for a good minute. The bell is, strangely enough, ringing in a weird pattern. David tells the others to get up and go back to another spot. They hide behind a bench this time, being further away from this strange church. The cloaked man comes out, looking concerned and ready to attack. He has an axe out. Panic rushes through everyone behind the bench, making everyone involved quickly agree to get the hell out. They try to sneak out, but David keeps his eyes on the cloaked man. What the cloaked man does will give my friend various amounts of what the hell thoughts forever. The cloaked man stops dead in his tracks, and then he falls to the ground. What's he doing? He's crawling around the gravestones rapidly, going from one to the other. However, he's not just doing that. He's making noises. The sound of the cloaked man spewing out growling-like sounds begins to conquer the frigid and motionless graveyard. Then abruptly, he gets up and smashes one of the gravestones with an axe without any reason, and then lets out a haunting scream up to the sky. Again, without any reason. David says, "Screw hiding," and they all run out. The cloaked man doesn't chase them, but looks into the distance. When he finished his story of discovering more about the cloaked man, I thought there would be no point in going there now. We all know that this cloaked man is a weirdo that preys on teens in poor, short-lived gravestones. What else can you find out? Well, I'm big on adventure, so I thought that me, David, and Sam, and many others could go exploring just a little more, just to see what else this guy does. So a few days later, we have our team. Sam, David, Charlie, Mike, and I. Charlie is a fat slob, and Mike is the witty man of the group. We all met up at the local tube station at daytime. We were going there at nighttime, but everyone wussed out, so we ended up going the middle of the day. We slowly walked through the empty alleyways and the council houses until we get to the gates, which were locked. We jumped over and began our adventure. Sadly, Charlie and Mike just weren't having it and climbed back out, but they weren't going anywhere though. They were going to be waiting for us. We wanted them to come with us, but after a minute, we left them and walked through the large pathway with the gravestones around us. About 20 minutes went by. Nothing was happening. Instead of going straight to the shed, we decided to take another route. All of us went through the claustrophobic maze-like section, where the gravestones were just covered with plant vines. We began walking around, and we began arguing amongst each other. Sam was bored and wanted out. Dave didn't care that much, and I wanted to go back into the open and find the shed and church. 5 minutes of pointless arguing later, and suddenly we hear footsteps. We look around. Nothing. "Get out your phone," Sam says to me. "Alright, wait a sec," I reply. Once I got my phone out, I unlock it and go to the camera. I began pointing at the remoteness with my iPhone, but nothing is lurking in the distance. At least not in our vision. We knew someone was near us, so we began frantically walking through this maze. Sam wants me to begin recording, so I do just that. Since nothing was happening again, the recording just becomes a dragged out video of us just walking around like idiots and looking in every direction. I switch the phone off and we go deeper into the cemetery. It gets darker and darker, and tighter. Then we see it. The cloaked man is following us now. I finally saw him when I looked back, and he was hiding behind a huge angel statue. He's stupidly close to us. "Guys, I see him behind us. Let's get out of here." David, being the confident and curious guy of our group, walks back and tries to catch the guy. I didn't want to see this crazy guy pop out, but I wasn't going to leave my friend, so we all went behind the statue and he was gone. Sam got overly paranoid and wanted us to get out. He had a crawly feeling that the cloaked man was just staring at us. We continued on, being idiots, and that's when I spot him again on the other side. He was a little bit further away this time, so I wasn't scared, but I could see him trying to get closer. He was trying to blend in horribly with the trees. I started to freak out. David and Sam noticed something moving, so we ran about 30 feet away. The cloaked man was now going in the other direction and entered the church, which was noticeably where we hid. Then we heard those bells. David confirmed that those bells were the same ones that he heard the other night. The cloaked man then came out, and he had a huge axe with him. Without any hesitation, he charged at our direction. Let me just clarify the locations by saying that we were all still in the maze-like area of the cemetery, but we could still see the open area in the distance, where the gravestones and church were located. So he was far away, but charging at our direction. He knew we were here. Even though we were hiding and nowhere near him, he still knew our location. He didn't change directions or anything. He sprinted on a line with his axe in both hands, and when I realized he was getting closer and closer, I yelled, "Run!" and we legged it. We ran and I looked behind. He was right there, ready to swing at us. We didn't want to split up, so we ran around the maze until we found a pathway with large hedges on the side. No going back. We all ran through the path, but after running down this path, I was beginning to have a heart attack. When I looked in front, I felt so much fear. I was already losing hope. It was a dead end. My friends and I were greeted with a locked shed at the end of the path, and no way to get in. There was also no way to climb on top of the shed either. We had the feeling of dread taking over our bodies. We waited a few minutes, and the cloaked man did not come. We silently went in the other direction, and stumbled back into the overgrown plant gravestone maze. We looked everywhere, finding broken tombstones and ripped up branches everywhere. There was silence for about 10 minutes, when we looked in every direction again, hoping the cloaked man was gone. All of us were sneaking around, until we got out of the maze and the claustrophobic feeling of that horrible area disappeared. The mundane gray clouds that suddenly appeared made the open cemetery look more disturbing and bleak than it already was. As we walked on, we heard a thunderstorm, and it looks like it was going to rain. We try to jog out of there, when we look and see something sticking out. The cloaked man is in the distance, with his hood off, standing on top of a gravestone. His face was visible, but not exactly. He was wearing a cliché Halloween mask for some reason. We stare at him for about 20 seconds before he goes down and begins crawling in our direction. We said screw this and ran until we jumped over the fence. Then we noticed Charlie and Mike wasn't there. Those bastards got bored and left, but I guess we can't blame them. After that, we were all freaked out and decided never to go into that cemetery again. We went home and that was it. The next day, I walked through a street with the cemetery on the left side and saw red tape and police inside the graveyard next to the church. I wish I had asked a police officer what was going on, but I was too freaked out to go back there, even with the police everywhere. I never did find out what happened there, and now that I think about it, I don't want to know. But there were rumors that the guy that was stalking and chasing us was just the caretaker wearing a mask, trying to scare people who went into the cemetery just to mess around. So the police investigation was probably nothing to do with the cloaked man. At least I hope not.
In 1982, there was a double murder with satanic undertones in my community. If you want to delve deeper into this very creepy story, I suggest you Google Corpsewood Manor. You will find extensive online accounts of many visitors to the site, as well as stories of paranormal occurrences. My story is this. In 1982, several years after the home the murders happened and was destroyed by a suspicious fire, myself and friends visited the place. It's located in a national forest that takes up a significant part of the North Georgia area. It's a mile hike to the ruins of the house. Today the house is still accessible, but is badly overgrown and easy to miss unless you are familiar with the area. We were there to collect samples of plants for a 10th grade biology project. I was 16 at the time, mature for my age. My father died when I was 13, and I lived in a cabin in the woods with my mother about 6 miles from the site of the murder. I had to grow up fast, learn to use chainsaws, cut firewood, get a job, and take care of a farm. I had no brothers or sisters. I had grown up in the woods and feared nothing. Weekends were spent camping and hiking. Amongst my group of friends, I was the mature, level-headed one and voice of reason. Thus, I had no fear to visit the site of the murders, or any fear of supernatural shenanigans. It was late spring and became early summer, just prior to school year ending. It was hot and humid already. We drove to the site in my pickup truck and parked and prepared to walk the mile to the ruin. As we began our trek, the sun was shining and there was not a cloud in the sky. After about a quarter mile, I began to notice a very heavy stillness and silence all around us. There were 4 of us all together. My friend continued on nervously. They really didn't want to go to this place at all. I dismissed their fears and called them sissies and scaredy cats. Trekking onwards, I noticed there was no normal sounds of the forest. No birds, no squirrels barking from the trees, no squirrels or rabbits scratching through the leaves, no wind, no voices either. My friends and I were uncharacteristically quiet. We could feel a building sense of gloom, of foreboding. We arrived at the ruins of the structure, falling in brick walls. A couple of freestanding brick buildings, circular in shape, used for bathhouses. A chicken came through, scuttering through the blackberry bushes that lined the path. It paused in the middle of the trail. It had no head. I swallowed a lump in my throat and turned around to look at my nearest friend. He was looking at me with wide, fright-filled eyes. That was enough for me. We turned around and beat a fast retreat to my truck. But it was a mile away. Halfway there, a malicious thunderstorm blew up. Lightning was coming down all around us. Rain was pouring through the canopy overhead and made the trail especially slippery and muddy. About the time we made it back to my truck, the storm ceased and the sun came back out. It was a 2-mile ride down the mountain to the nearest paved road. When we got there, the road was bone dry and there was no sign it had rained a drop. This was between 2 to 3 p.m. The whole incident lasted maybe an hour from parking truck to fleeing the storm and make it off the mountain. Make what you want of the incident, but I know what I saw and what I experienced. I've never been back to that place. I would go back, but I've never found a reason compelling enough to override my reluctance. When I was in high school, me and my friends would spend Halloween night at our friend Emily's house. Her parents were cool with us hanging out and being teenagers all night, so often we would trick-or-treat and spend the night and get drunk, etc. Emily lives about 1,000 feet from our high school, and the neighborhood was arranged in a square pattern. A park, 4 streets bordering it, 4 more streets surrounding that. The layout means there's a lot of side streets, alleyways, and there's a dozen ways to get to any one house. Our sophomore year, we did our usual thing. This year I went as a pimp because all my friends wanted to wear sexy outfits. We started drinking a bottle of crappy vodka and went trick-or-treating. For about an hour it was fun. Saw a bunch of friends from high school, got candy, talked about sneaking some guys over later on. It was shaping up to be a good night. But as we reached one corner of the neighborhood and turned down the next, this creepy man comes up to us. He was what you imagine someone's dad would look like. Old, kind of slovenly, balding, and most importantly, not attending to a child. He approaches us, and I say something in character like, "Which girl are you interested in?" We giggle and laugh and continue passing him, but he reached out and grabbed one of our friends, a firm grip on her arm. He says something along the lines of, "She's really cute." "How much are you asking?" At first I was just fooling around, but him grabbing her made all of us very uncomfortable. "Dude, we're messing around. We're just 15. He lets go, and we bounce. My friend freaks out, and we decide not to play around anymore and just go get some candy. We head down another street and keep a lookout for this guy. My friend's still grossed out, but we manage to keep our fun going. But this guy shows up again, scanning the crowd for us. Quickly we lock eyes, and he backs off into the flow of the crowd. I tell my friends the creeper is still following us, and we skip a few houses to put some distance between us and this guy. We keep going, and we see him again, only this time he's in front of us. Like I mentioned, the number of side streets and alleys means that you can take a detour off the main street and still end up in the same destination. And with 30 or 40 people passing through at the time, nobody really notices a single out-of-the-place man. We see him, and we stop dead. This guy is clearly following us, and we made it pretty clear that we were kids messing around. We decided to stomach it and keep going past him, pretending that we didn't even notice the creepy man. As we go by, he says nothing, just watching us as obviously as he possibly can before we turn down the street, and once again, we can't see him anymore. We run out of there and go back to Emily's house, hoping that we're moving too fast for him to follow us. We get back to her house, and we decompress and flip out for a few minutes, but we forget about it once we get the bonfire going. The guys sneak over, and we pass the drinks around. A few hours later, the streets are empty, and the only people still up are us. Trying our best to keep as silent as we can, we hear a car moving slowly down the street. Not like someone's heading home after a night out, but like they're trying to look out the window, and moving too fast would make them miss it. We look out over the gate and see the car creeping along, but it's also too dark inside to really make out who was driving. But we watched it hit the end of the street and keep going. It passed by another time that night, and it got us all wound up, so we called it a night. It was a family neighborhood, so no one would really be driving out around 2 a.m. In our heads, the only person who would be doing something like that was the man that we saw earlier, looking for us. So creepy guy who grabbed my underage friend with a bunch of people around and followed us for most of the night. Let's not meet again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.